They realized the narcissist never stops talking about you. At first, people tried to be understanding. They assumed the narcissist was angry, maybe hurt, maybe embarrassed things ended the way they did. But then something strange started happening. Your name kept showing up everywhere. Forced into conversations like a commercial interrupting a movie, nobody wanted paused. Somebody could mention trust, relationships, money, church, healing somehow. Every road led back to you. It became exhausting. Like watching somebody pace around the same emotional graveyard, refusing to let the dead thing rest. And slowly, people started realizing this was no longer venting. This was obsession wearing the clothes of conversation. Because while your silence grew quieter, the narcissist only grew louder. Your peace made them angrier. Your absence sat inside their mind like a splinter they could not pull out. So they kept bringing you up. Like a man arguing with a ghost nobody else could see. People started noticing the bitterness underneath the performance. The strange satisfaction they got from repeating your name while pretending they were over it. The contradiction became impossible to ignore. Because nobody talks this much about somebody who means nothing to them. And the more the narcissist spoke, the more they exposed the real wound underneath all the arrogance. The unbearable realization that somebody they once controlled emotionally finally detached and stopped needing their approval to survive. So instead of grieving quietly, instead of going to God, instead of facing themselves honestly, they kept performing, kept gossiping, kept replaying old stories like scratched records in a dusty room. And slowly the people around them started changing. The sympathy became thinner. The reactions became shorter. The eye contact started disappearing. Because eventually everybody reaches the same thought when dealing with a narcissist trapped in obsession. Why are they still talking about this? And without realizing it, the narcissist was already walking into the next stage of humiliation. Because soon, people were not just tired of hearing about you. They were getting tired of them. 1. People started feeling drained every time the narcissist walked into the room. The narcissist did not notice it immediately. At first, people still answered the calls, still tried to be patient, but little by little, something started changing. The room felt different whenever they showed up, not because they brought chaos loudly, because they carried tension quietly. You could feel it in the way conversations suddenly became careful around them. Like everybody unconsciously started choosing words more cautiously so the night would not turn uncomfortable again. The narcissist always seemed irritated underneath the surface, just waiting for something to trigger them emotionally. And after a while, people started feeling emotionally tired every time they were around them, because every interaction somehow became work. The narcissist could never simply enjoy a moment peacefully. There always had to be a hidden complaint somewhere, a bitter joke, a passive-aggressive comment, a subtle attempt to pull sympathy out of the room. Even their laughter started sounding forced, like somebody smiling with their teeth clenched. And eventually, people stopped feeling warmth around them. They started feeling pressure. The kind of pressure that makes people glance at their phones during conversations. The kind that makes somebody suddenly remember they have an early morning tomorrow. The kind that shortens visits without anybody openly admitting why. Because deep down, everybody was feeling the same thing. This person is exhausting to be around. Not exhausting because they talked too much. Exhausting because nothing around them ever felt emotionally settled. There was always frustration leaking through somewhere, a random emotional shift that made everybody else in the room uncomfortable. And the narcissist kept making one fatal mistake. They thought people were listening to their words. People were actually studying their behavior, the defensiveness, the bitterness, the emotional heaviness they carried into every interaction. Eventually, people stopped answering with the same energy. stopped sounding excited to see them. The narcissist could feel the distance growing, but instead of calming down, they became more emotionally restless. You could see it all over them. The forced confidence, the fake smiles, the irritation whenever attention shifted away from them. It started looking less like confidence and more like somebody trying desperately to hold themselves together in public. And once that happens, people stop viewing somebody as convincing. They start viewing them as unstable. That is when the real humiliation begins. Not when enemies attack them. When ordinary people quietly stop wanting to be around them anymore. And soon, somebody was finally going to say what the entire room had been holding back for a very long time. 2. Shut the hell up. The public humiliation they never expected. Most people do not confront exhausting individuals immediately. They tolerate them. They smile through the discomfort. They let comments slide because keeping the peace feels easier than creating conflict. And the narcissist mistakes that tolerance for power. They think the room still belongs to them. So they keep going. More slick little insults. More dramatic storytelling. More attempts to turn themselves into the victim while painting you as cold, cruel, selfish, ungrateful, unstable, whatever narrative feeds their ego that day. But something dangerous happens when a person pushes too far for too long. People stop swallowing their irritation. And one night, one conversation, one exhausted moment finally changed everything. The narcissist started again. Maybe it was at dinner. Maybe at a family gathering. Maybe over drinks with people who had already heard the same story 20 different ways. They started talking about you with that same emotional charge in their voice, that same bitterness disguised as confidence, acting like the room was still emotionally invested in their performance. But this time, nobody looked interested. You know those moments where somebody keeps talking and the silence around them starts feeling heavier and heavier. People looked away, took slow sips from their drinks. The narcissist kept going anyway, because narcissistic people often cannot feel when a room emotionally leaves them. Their ego keeps performing long after the audience has mentally walked out. Then suddenly somebody snapped. "Shut the hell up!" No nervous laughter afterward. No apology. No softening the blow. Just pure frustration finally escaping into the open air. And for a second, everything froze. The narcissist looked shocked. Not angry first, shocked. Because public humiliation hits narcissists differently than ordinary people. It attacks the exact thing they spend their lives protecting their image. And in that moment, the image cracked. Not because you exposed them. Because people got tired. There is something deeply humiliating about realizing people were never agreeing with you as much as they were enduring you. The narcissist suddenly became aware of the room in the worst possible way. The uncomfortable faces. The absence of anybody rushing to defend them. And that silence told the truth louder than words ever could. People were done. Done pretending the obsession looked normal. Done pretending the bitterness sounded justified. Done carrying the emotional weight of somebody who refused to move on. You could almost feel the narcissist scrambling internally after that moment, trying to laugh it off, trying to regain control, trying to act unaffected. But embarrassment changes the human face, especially unexpected embarrassment. Their eyes changed. Their tone changed. Their entire energy became shaky. Because once humiliation enters a narcissist publicly, paranoia usually follows right behind it. Now they start wondering, how many people secretly felt this way? How long have they been annoyed with me? What else are they saying behind my back? For the first time, the narcissist starts feeling what they tried making you feel for so long. Social rejection. Except this time, they cannot control it. And once people openly lose respect for a narcissist, the entire illusion begins collapsing very fast. Because now the room is no longer emotionally hypnotized by the performance. People start replaying everything differently in their minds. The manipulation starts looking obvious. The victim act starts looking rehearsed. The gossip starts sounding pathetic instead of convincing. And without realizing it, the narcissist walked directly into the worst possible outcome imaginable. They talked so much trying to destroy your credibility that they destroyed their own instead. 3. Their smear campaign backfired horribly. The narcissist thought repetition would make people believe them. They thought if they told the story enough times, with enough emotion, with enough confidence, eventually everybody would see you the way they wanted them to. But something humiliating started happening instead. People stopped paying attention to the accusations and started paying attention to the obsession behind them. Because once somebody notices obsession, the performance immediately loses credibility. Now every insult sounded personal. Every complaint sounded emotional. Every dramatic story sounded rehearsed. The narcissist could feel the shift too. You can always tell when people stop buying what somebody is selling. The reactions become delayed. The sympathy starts sounding fake. Conversations lose emotional energy. And deep down, the narcissist knew they were losing control of the narrative. They started over-explaining, talking too much, trying too hard to convince people they were right. But desperation always damages credibility. Because calm people do not fight this hard to destroy somebody's image after the relationship already ended, people naturally understand that. So the harder the narcissist pushed, the more suspicious they started looking, like somebody trying to bury a truth before it reached daylight. And the room started noticing contradictions everywhere. The narcissist claimed you were crazy, yet they could not stop monitoring your life. They claimed you were toxic, yet they talked about you more than anybody else in the world. They claimed they moved on, yet your name still emotionally controlled their mood. Those contradictions became impossible to hide anymore. And once contradictions start piling up publicly, respect starts collapsing quietly behind the scenes. People started revisiting old conversations differently in their minds. Old stories suddenly sounded exaggerated. Old complaints suddenly sounded manipulative. Old accusations suddenly felt emotionally loaded instead of factual. It was like scales falling from people's eyes, one piece at a time. And the narcissist made the mistake narcissists always make when panic sets in. They doubled down. More gossip, more image management, more attempts to control how people viewed you. But every new attempt only created more evidence against themselves. Because when somebody spends months trying to convince the world they are unbothered while acting deeply bothered, eventually the behavior starts speaking louder than the words. And behavior never lies for very long. Some people around them even started getting embarrassed on the narcissist's behalf. That second-hand embarrassment is brutal. Watching somebody try so hard to destroy another person while unknowingly humiliating themselves in the process, especially because your energy no longer matched the narrative they were selling. You were not chasing them, not arguing publicly, not begging people to believe your side. You looked calmer than the person accusing you. That contrast destroyed the smear campaign more than any revenge ever could. Because people trust emotional consistency, and the narcissist no longer looked emotionally consistent. They looked unstable. Meanwhile, your silence kept exposing them without saying a single word. If you can recognize the moment somebody destroys their own credibility trying to destroy yours, type 77 inches the comments. Because some of the worst downfalls in life happen when people become so obsessed with controlling another person's image that they completely lose control of their own. And by now, something even bigger was starting to happen. People were no longer asking, what happened between them? Now people were starting to ask, What did this person do to make somebody walk away so completely? 4. People finally understood why you left. People started seeing them the way you saw them. Not the charming version. Not the public version. Not the polished performance they spent years protecting. The real version. And once people saw it, they could not unsee it anymore. Suddenly, your distance made sense. Your silence made sense. Your exhaustion made sense. Even the way you disappeared emotionally started making perfect sense. Because now other people were finally experiencing pieces of what you endured privately for so long. The tension, the emotional manipulation, the constant need for control, the strange ability narcissists have to make every room revolve around their emotions. People started noticing how careful they felt around them, how conversations suddenly became complicated, how one small disagreement could shift the narcissist's entire mood, how criticism, even tiny criticism, immediately turned into defensiveness or rage. And slowly, the image started cracking everywhere. Not through exposure videos, not through revenge, not through public fights. People started remembering old moments differently. Moments they ignored before suddenly looked darker now. Little comments that once sounded harmless suddenly sounded cruel. Jokes started sounding passive-aggressive. Concern started sounding controlling. The narcissist could feel people emotionally pulling away from them in real time. That terrified them more than losing you ever did. Because losing you wounded their ego. But losing public perception? That threatens the identity they built their entire life around. And the more frightened they became internally, the more unnatural they started acting externally. The fake confidence became louder. The stories became more dramatic. The emotional reactions became harder to hide. There is something deeply unsettling about watching one person spiral while the other person becomes calmer after leaving them. People notice that, especially when the narcissist spent so much time trying to convince everybody you were the unstable one. Now the room was quietly realizing something painful. Maybe you were not escaping love. Maybe you were escaping emotional captivity. That realization hit people hard, because many of them had defended the narcissist before, listened to them, believed parts of the story. Now they started feeling uncomfortable about it, even guilty. You could almost see it in the way people looked at you differently afterward, softer, more respectful, more understanding. And eventually people can feel the difference between somebody protecting their peace and somebody trying desperately to protect an image. The narcissist lost that difference. Now every emotional reaction exposed them further. And the worst part for them? You were no longer trying to explain yourself. That silence became devastating, because once people finally see a narcissist clearly, they start replaying everything differently in their own mind. All of it suddenly connects together, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. And when those pieces connect, respect dies fast. The narcissist could feel that death happening around them. Conversations became colder. People stopped rushing to comfort them emotionally. Some even started avoiding them completely. Because being around somebody unraveling internally starts affecting everybody around them eventually. And by this point, the unraveling was no longer subtle anymore. Something inside the narcissist was beginning to crack openly. The emotional control was slipping. The anger was becoming harder to contain. And soon, people were about to witness a side of them far more disturbing than gossip. 5. The narcissist started spiraling mentally. At this point, the narcissist was no longer hiding it well. You could see the cracks now, not small cracks either. The kind that change somebody's face. Their sleep, their energy, their entire presence. Because there comes a stage in every narcissist's downfall where anger stops looking powerful and starts looking unstable. The emotional control they once used so carefully was slipping through their fingers in public now. Tiny things started triggering them. Delayed text messages. Even seeing other people peaceful without them seemed to irritate something deep inside their chest. Nothing was calming them down anymore. Not gossip, not attention. You can only perform strength for so long before emotional exhaustion starts exposing the truth underneath. And the truth underneath them was ugly. Sleepless nights, racing thoughts, constant irritation, mood swings nobody could predict anymore. People started noticing how quickly their emotions shifted. One moment, they acted confident. The next moment, they looked furious over something tiny. Then suddenly withdrawn. Then emotionally charged all over again. Like somebody fighting battles inside their own mind every hour of the day. Some people even noticed the narcissist talking to themselves more. Replaying conversations. Obsessing over details nobody else cared about anymore. Bringing up things that happened months ago like the wound was still fresh inside them. You became the unfinished chapter their ego could not close. And that kind of obsession slowly eats people alive from the inside. Especially people who built their identity around control. Because every day you remained detached became another reminder they no longer had power over you emotionally. That reality tortured them. You could feel the panic underneath their behavior now. The fake confidence became too loud. The laughter lasted too long. The emotional reactions stopped matching the situation. People around them started getting uncomfortable in a different way now. Before, they felt drained. Now, they felt concerned. Not for you, for the narcissist. Because the unraveling was becoming visible. There is something eerie about watching somebody desperately try to look emotionally composed while their inner world is clearly collapsing right in front of everybody. And deep down, the narcissist knew people could see it. That made them spiral even harder. They started trying to prove themselves constantly, trying to look happier than they really were. But the performance no longer looked convincing. It looked frantic. Like somebody trying to duct tape a breaking dam while water exploded through every crack. And the terrifying part was this: they still blamed you for all of it. That is how deep narcissistic denial runs sometimes. Rather than sitting alone with God and confronting the truth honestly, they keep searching for external targets to blame for the chaos inside them. But chaos ignored always grows louder. And theirs was growing loud enough for everybody else to hear now. People started whispering about their behavior privately. Questions started circulating quietly. Are they okay? What happened to them? Why do they seem so emotionally unstable lately? The narcissist could sense those conversations happening behind closed doors too. Now they felt watched, judged, rejected. Exactly the emotions they once tried forcing onto you. And slowly, the emotional collapse started pushing them towards something narcissists fear more than almost anything else in life. The kind where nobody wants to carry your emotional chaos anymore. 6. Nobody wanted to carry their bitterness anymore. What finally destroyed the narcissist was not exposure, it was emptiness. The slow, terrifying realization that people no longer wanted to emotionally carry them anymore. Because there comes a point where bitterness stops making people feel sorry for you and starts making them feel trapped around you. And the narcissist crossed that line a long time ago without realizing it. You could see it happening everywhere. Friends stopped calling as much. Conversations became shorter. People no longer sounded emotionally available when the narcissist needed attention. The warmth disappeared first. That fake social warmth people give out of politeness. Because nobody can endlessly absorb somebody else's resentment without eventually becoming exhausted themselves. Especially when every interaction starts revolving around the same emotional darkness over and over again. The narcissist had become emotionally heavy to carry. Every room they entered felt tighter afterward. Every conversation somehow drifted into tension. Even moments that should have been peaceful started feeling emotionally crowded around them, and people noticed how different life felt after they left the room. That is a painful realization for narcissistic people when others begin associating peace with their absence instead of their presence. The narcissist could feel themselves slipping socially now. People still smiled sometimes, still answered occasionally, still acted civil, but emotionally they were backing away. You can always feel when people stop opening their heart fully around you. The conversations become surface level. The connection loses warmth. Because people no longer wanted involvement with the chaos surrounding the narcissist. They no longer wanted the tension, the emotional unpredictability, the constant undercurrent of bitterness sitting beneath every interaction. The narcissist became the kind of person others mentally prepared themselves for before speaking to. And once somebody reaches that stage socially, loneliness starts arriving fast. Not physical loneliness first, emotional loneliness. The kind where people are around you but no longer emotionally connected to you. That silence began eating the narcissist alive, especially at night, because nighttime is cruel to people who spend all day avoiding themselves. Once the distractions fade, truth gets louder. And the truth waiting for the narcissist in those quiet hours was unbearable. You really left emotionally. No emotional hooks left. No need for closure. No desire to reconnect. That reality shattered something inside them because narcissists often survive on the belief that they still emotionally exist inside your mind somehow. Even anger can comfort them because anger still means attachment. But your calmness, your detachment, your peace, that felt like erasure to them. And nothing terrifies narcissistic people more than feeling emotionally erased from somebody they once controlled. So they started collapsing inward. The fake confidence stopped looking believable. The forced happiness started looking sad. The endless need for validation became obvious. People could see the loneliness sitting on them now. Not the kind loneliness creates in gentle people. The kind created by resentment. Because bitterness isolates slowly. It pushes people away one exhausted interaction at a time until eventually the narcissist looks around and realizes the room they once controlled emotionally has gone cold. No audience, no emotional supply, no real connection left. Just silence. And in that silence, the narcissist was finally forced to sit face to face with the one thing they spent all this time running from. Meanwhile, your life kept moving. One person kept unraveling after the separation. The other person finally started healing. That alone told the entire story without you needing to say a single word. And by now, the narcissist's collapse was no longer something hidden behind closed doors. People were starting to openly see how mentally and emotionally unstable they had truly become. Your silence became their judgment. In the end, the narcissist did not lose their mind because you exposed them. They lost their mind because you stopped emotionally belonging to them. That was the wound they never recovered from. The real wound was watching somebody they once controlled become completely unreachable emotionally. Because narcissists survive on emotional access. They need reactions, need tension, need to feel they still live inside your thoughts somehow. Even anger feeds them because anger still creates connection. But your silence gave them nothing. No rage, no begging, just absence. The kind of absence that slowly forces a person to realize they no longer matter in the same way they once did. And that realization started destroying the narcissist from the inside out. You could see it in them eventually. The eyes looked tired. The confidence looked rehearsed. Even their happiness started feeling unnatural, like somebody acting cheerful while drowning underwater. Because no matter how much noise they created around your name, they could not change one terrifying truth. You were finally free from them emotionally. That freedom haunted them, especially because they remember who you were before the detachment happened. They remember the version of you who cared deeply, the version who tried fixing things, the version who carried emotional weight that was never yours to carry in the first place. And now that version is gone forever. That is what shattered them. You stopped revolving around their emotions, stopped needing their approval, stopped trying to convince people of your goodness. You simply walked away internally. And once somebody truly leaves emotionally, there is almost nothing more frightening to a narcissist than that silence afterward. Because silence leaves no doorway back inside your mind. The narcissist was eventually forced to face something they spent their entire life avoiding, their own reflection, without somebody else there to absorb the damage. No more emotional dumping. No more controlling the room. No more feeding off reactions. Just themselves. And for people who spent years running from inner emptiness through power, attention, manipulation, and validation, that kind of confrontation feels unbearable. Especially in quiet moments. Especially when life slows down enough for the truth to finally speak clearly. And the truth was brutal. You became stronger after leaving them. Your spirit became calmer. Your discernment sharper. Your relationship with God deeper. Meanwhile, the narcissist became consumed by the very darkness they spent years trying to project onto you. That is why people eventually stopped looking at you with suspicion and started looking at the narcissist with concern. Because truth reveals itself through fruit. One person walked away and slowly rebuilt peace. The other person spiraled after losing emotional control over somebody they thought would never leave. And maybe that is the deepest form of judgment God allows sometimes. Not lightning from heaven, not dramatic revenge. A quiet separation that forces people to live alone with the consequences of who they became. The narcissist spent so much time trying to convince the world you were unstable, difficult, cold, impossible to love. But in the end, the collapse happened on their side of the story, not yours. You stopped fighting, stopped explaining, stopped carrying emotional chaos that was never yours to heal. And once you stopped feeding the cycle, the narcissist finally had no choice left but to sit inside the emotional world they created themselves. And in that silence, everything they tried burying underneath gossip, ego, manipulation, and control finally rose to the surface all at once. That is why your silence became their judgment. The one thing that ultimately destroyed the narcissist was realizing they could no longer reach you anymore.